Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, Nedarim Samach Zayin. We begin a brand new Perek Na'ara Hamurasa. Let's begin on Samach Vav Beis, on the last line. So we look at the Psukim in Parshas Matos, we find as follows. The Torah grants a father access to his daughter's Nedarim. She makes a neder, and according to some Rishonim, any type of neder, according to others, only something which is disturbing, inoi nefesh, or something which is going to affect the father. Either way, the Torah gives father the ability to disrupt those nedarim, or to confirm those nedarim. Disruption is called hafara. He says, I'm not uninterested in this neder, I want it to be nullified. Or he allows it to stand, or he actually confirms it by saying, I'd like to have that neder stand. That would be called hakama. So that's the zechus of a father. Now, what age daughter are we speaking? Well, of course, until 11, there's nothing to talk about. Her words don't have power to affect a neder. Once she turns 11, that's close enough to adulthood, in which case her expressions have legal value. They carry weight. From that point on, her neder takes effect, and her father can be made for the neder up until she leaves his rishus. She's at the point of boy geres. So she turns na'ara at 12, when she's an adult, bas mitzvah. 6 months later, she's a boy geres, a super adult, in which case he loses total control, in which case he can no longer interfere with her business. So when she's in his rishus, father can disrupt. Once she's married, husband has a say in her matter. Pasuk speaks about that as well. Once she's married, the Baal now has control over her nedarim. We're going to see in the Perek, it only pertains to certain specific nedarim which affect him, etc. What about in the interim stage? She is engaged. She's a mikudeshes. We're speaking more than just today's engagement. She actually accepted, a ring or money. A fellow engaged her. He's now a chasam, and in the words of Chazal, we call him a Baal. It's like a husband, not yet married, engaged, but a Baal nonetheless. What happens then in terms of her nedarim? Here comes the Mishnah. Na'ara hamu'urasa. You have an Isha who's a Nara, meaning as opposed to, she's already a begeres beyond her father's control. So we're speaking that she's still at that point where father has rishus, father has control, and she is mu'urasa, she's engaged. There's another man in her life, a husband, who has the ability to control her nedarim. Avia ubala, mefirin nedarea, husband and father jointly will be made for her nedarim. So it's a joint effort. Let's say the father would be Reuven, husband is Shimon. Reuven and Shimon together in conjunction with each other will be made for nedarim. But one alone is not enough. Hey for Hav, father enter in, disrupted the neder, but hey for Abal, but Shimon the husband had no say in the matter. Or the other way, hey for Abba, v'lei for Av, Shimon got involved but not Reuven. Einoi mufar, there's no disruption. And certainly, in the third and last part of the Mishnah, we have Vein Tzarech Lemer. Of course, it goes without saying that in the following case, the neder is not mufar. Shekiyim echad mehem. Suppose one of these fellows actually made hakama, he confirmed the neder, in which case you can't have afara. So we have three parts of the Mishnah. First, the introduction, the concept. A nara homurasa is jointly controlled by Reuven and Shimon. Then we go on to say what this means is that Reuven can't do it without Shimon, and likewise Shimon without Reuven. And thirdly, we say, certainly if one of them confirmed, made a hakama, there's no way to get out of the neder. Asks the Gemara, once we have the first part, which says that nara homurasa, avia ubala mefirin derea, why does the Mishnah have to continue and say, well, father without husband, husband without father is worthless? Isn't that obvious? Hainu reisha. Avia ubala mefirin derel. That's already been discussed in the first line of the Mishnah. Father and husband have to join together. One alone is not enough. Ma'odatema, perhaps I would think. Oy avia, oy bala katani. When the Mishnah starts with avia ubala, sometimes the vav u can mean like or, either or, father or husband can do it. Avia oy bala katani k'mashmalon. That's why the Mishnah elaborates further and explains it clearly. What we meant is father can't do it without husband, husband cannot do it without father. But then the third part of the Mishnah seems to be superfluous. It goes without saying. One of these parties made hakama, the other one can't interfere. Well, isn't that obvious? Why even mention this point? Once you tell me that Hefer Zebel is Zeh, Reuben does hafara without Shimon, it's insufficient. Once you know that, you already know the second part. Why do you even have to say what would happen if one of the parties was Mekayim? Once you already told me that there are two parts to the hafara. Each fellow on his own is not sufficient. It's a joint effort. So unless you have both of them disrupting, both of them applying hafara, you don't have the hafara. And of course, it goes without saying, if one of them turns around and confirms it, is Mekayim the Neder, you can't have the hafara. What's the point of even mentioning this case of the Mishnah? Answers the Gemara, there is a chiddush here. Ki itzruchle. You know what the point of this last phrase is? Ki going the high for echad mehen. What happened was Ruvain did hafara. Vikiyim echad, and Shimon did hakama. And then he turned around and undid what he did. V'chazar Mekayim, and Shimon, who did the hakama, which is like, confirming, like making the neder, he went ahead and he was shoyel. V'nishal halakamasa. He went to the chacham to undo what he did. Just like a person who makes a neder can be mater neder. A husband who did hakama on his wife's neder can be mater that hakama. So now he undid his damage. What would happen now? Now the time, perhaps I would think, we're back to square one. So Reuven did the hafara, Shimon did hakama, and then he undid the hakama. Perhaps we're back to where we started. And Reuven's hafara is still outstanding, which simply allows Shimon to add his hafara to the fray. Perhaps I would say what Shimon did, meaning his hakama, ha'akri. He has already uprooted that, removed what he did. That leaves us with Reuven's hafara, which can simply be complemented by Shimon's hafara. Kamash Malon, the chiddush is it does not work. You know why? Because once Reuven's hafara was sort of disrupted by Shimon's hakama, because you see, Reuven can't do hafara on his own. It's just, one of two legs here. He has to sort of co-join Shimon. Right? So it needs to be mitzdaref to Shimon's hafara, and Shimon actually turned around and rejected Reuven's hafara. He made hakama. So you know what that does? It disqualifies Reuven's hafara. Kamashmon, that's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Once Shimon did hakama after Reuven's hafara, the mefirin shneim bevas achas. The only way to come back and nullify the neder is if we start all over again. So again, Reuven did hafara, Shimon did hakama, and then we removed that hakama. We go back to Reuven and say, you know what? Start over again. you both can do the hafara, provided that you do it in one continuum. But you can redo it. That's the Shita Saran and the Ramban. Whereas the Rambam actually learns that once the process was disrupted through Shimon's hakama, you can't go back to Reuven and say, redo the hafara which was disrupted. You get one chance, one shot at it. And once the hafara became disqualified, you can't redo it. That's the Rambam's Shita. But the Ram disagrees. He says, even if it was already, disrupted and messed up, redo it. Start fresh. There's always a second chance. So bottom line is, the Mishnah has three parts. First, the introduction, the concept. An engaged Isha, who's still in her father's, Rishus somewhat. She's still young enough to be considered in her father's Rishus. But father does not have exclusive rights over her Nedarim. Rather, father, who is Reuven, Shimon, who's the Chassan, need to join forces to be made for the Nedarim. one alone is not enough. That's the second part of the Mishnah. Each one needs the other one. And the third part is if there was a hakama done by one of them, he needs to start the whole thing from scratch. So now to the source of this concept. V'nara hamurasa avia ubalo mefirin derel minalam. So we're going to have the first of several possible sources for this halacha. How do we know this is true? That a nara hamurasa's neder must be addressed by both parties. Amarabad amakra. V'mahaya sielish unedareh aleh. So if we study the Parshas Matis, discussing the idea of Hafaras and Nedarim, we'll find three groups of psukim. Firstly, we have a single girl in her father's rishus, where the pasuk clearly says, father will be mefer on his own. Then later on we have psukim dealing with a married woman who makes a neder while married. What happens there? Husband interferes on his own. Then we have the middle psukim. So this pasuk is, immediately following the discussion about a single girl and her father's rishus. We have vi'im, sort of a connection. Right? The Iran says it's vav. Vav connects. Vav ha'moisif. And she goes and gets involved with a man, which we're going to interpret as meaning erusin, engagement, not married, but engagement. And she brings along pre-existing nedarim from singlehood. Pasuk says, husband will interfere. We learn from here that there is an intermediary stage, the stage of engagement. Mikan lenara hamurasa. We learn about hamurasa, shavir ubala mefirim dareah, that father together with husband will get involved in her nedar. Asks the Gemara, how do you know? Maybe this pasuk describing a woman being involved with an ish, speaking about marriage. So sure, once married, husband can get involved. But how do you know he can get involved during engagement? Well, the answer is very simple. We already have another pasuk later on that discusses marriage. That's the other pasuk. She made a neder while married, then husband interferes. Says the Gemara, maybe both discussions pertain to a married woman. The pasuk of Beis Isha Nadara and this pasuk of Imayes Yelish. Then he'll ask me, why would I need two psukim for the same status? Well, to tell you, she'ein habal mefer b'koydmin. Perhaps the reason why the pasuk has to repeat and say V'im Beis Isha Nadara, then husband will interfere. That's to teach you a profound chidush. A husband can only step in and disrupt his wife's neder if that neder was expressed after marriage. But Eina Baal Mefer B'Koydmin, he can't go back in time. He can't interfere with a pre-existing neder, a neder which was activated prior to marriage. He has no access to that point in her life. So maybe that's why the pasuk is repeating. Husband can only access, can only disrupt a neder which was done Beis Isha. Answers the Gemara, but just take a look at that second pasuk. It's all included. We don't need two psukim for these things. The pasuk says, Beis Isha Nadara, which means if she made a neder while married, husband can be mefer. It's all included in that pasuk. A, that husband can be mefer, and number two, which nedarim can he interfere with? Those that were done Beis Isha Nedar, local nedarim, but not pre-existing nedarim. So it's all in that pasuk. So why did the Torah mention the other pasuk? Apparently that's speaking about a different point in her life, the engagement period. And that has a totally different halacha. At that point, Reuven and Shimon, father and husband, will share control over her nedarim. And the only way to do hafara is having both together join in the hafara. Another answer to your question. How do we know that The pasuk of Ish, that middle pasuk, is describing the engagement period. The Havaya, the Lashon Havaya, typically is a reference to Kiddushin, not marriage. Kiddushin mashma. So that's how we know we're speaking about an engaged Isha. Okay. So we see clearly that engagement is different than marriage. So again, when she's single, father controls. When she's married, husband controls the nether. When she's in between, it's a joint effort. The question is, sure, husband needs the father, but who says father needs the husband? The fact is, she was, in his rishus up until now. Perhaps he holds on to her to the extent that he can just do it on his own. Ema, maybe we'll say, the point of engagement is obviously different than when she was totally single or totally married. But maybe not so far. Not as you are proposing, that father needs the husband needs the father. Ema, maybe the father has an advantage over the husband. Maybe if the father chooses to do a farah, he can do it on his own. The husband cannot. If the husband wants to do a farah, he needs to ask the father to join. But perhaps the father who is there, who is the only player in her life until now, maybe he retains full rights. And if he chooses to do a farah, he doesn't need the husband's assistance. The answer to that is remember, there's a first pasuk describing her single status. She makes a neder during that point when she's still totally in her father's jurisdiction. Father will be mefer. Why is that necessary? Why does the Torah have to go into that? To tell me father has exclusive rights over her nedarim at that point? Well, obviously, if he has exclusive rights, even during her engagement, when there was another person in her life, still we say father exercises total control. Even when there's an aris in her life, mefer avl chodei, you tell me the father has exclusive rights, such as you're proposing. It goes without saying, if there's no aris in her life, when she's totally single, of course, father is the sole player in her life. Of course, you don't need a pasuk for that. The fact that the Torah troubles itself to tell us that when she's single, father is the only player. Father totally controls her nedarim. Indicates to us that once she's engaged, that changes. And that yes, father needs to join together with husband. Okay, fine, granted. Let's flip it around. Father needs husband. But maybe husband, who's about to take total control of her, she's about to totally go into his rishus. Maybe he has total control over her nedarim. Maybe we'll say, avli bayi aris. The father needs the aris to join him. But v'aris lichudei mefer. Aris can do it on his own. So back to the question, how do you know that during the engagement period, it only works as a joint effort? Maybe husband can do it on his own. Perhaps he'll say, if that's true, that husband doesn't need the father, then why would the pasuk even, mention that the father can be involved at the point of engagement? Why do we need him for? The answer is we needed the hakim. True, you don't need him to disrupt the nether. Husband can do it on his own, but there still is a chiddush here that it's the father decides to confirm the nether. He can do that. He can get in the aris's way. So again, if the aris does have farah, that would be enough. Perhaps. You don't need the father to actively be mefer, but if he actually confirms the nether, maybe that's worse. So maybe that's the halacha. The baal can be mefer without the father's hafara, unless he actually makes hakama, which disrupts the system. Is that true? Says the Gemara, no. Imkain, because if that were so, beis isha nadara l'may kosav. Remember, there's a third set of psukim. Post-marriage. At that point, husband has total control. L'may kosav. What's the point of saying that? If you already had full control during engagement, certainly after marriage, kal v'chomer, u'ma b'makim av. if during engagement, when there's a father in the picture, Arus Meifel Chodei, you tell me the Arus has total control. He's the only one that needs to do the hafara. Certainly, certainly later on after marriage, when there's no longer a father in the picture, is there any need to speak about my husband's ability to be made for the neder? So the fact that the Torah has to go and trouble itself and tell us that a husband can interfere with his wife's neder indicates to us that's exclusive to post-marriage. But prior to marriage, during the engagement, it is a joint effort between Reuven and Shimon, father and husband. One more kasha. Maybe it's not so. The Baal can be made for himself during engagement and during marriage. Question is, if he can do so during engagement, certainly during marriage, why even mention his ability to be made for during marriage? Perhaps the Torah is mentioning that as a chumrah, to limit his abilities after marriage. So we know that during engagement, the husband can do hafara even on a neder which was pre-existing, which predated the engagement. But perhaps once she's married, as the pasuk says, his ability to override her neder is only the neder which was done during marriage, not predating marriage. So maybe that's why the pasuk has to repeat the case for that point. But again, perhaps, whether it's married or even engaged, only a husband will do the hafara. Says the Gemara, 1 second. We're going to make a dig from this halach, from this pasuk. You're telling me that post-marriage, we'll only give the husband access to Nedarim that were done post-marriage. What about Nedarim during the engagement period? Oros mefer b'koidmen. Take a look at the other pasuk. The other pasuk is speaking about Nedarim which predated that status. And we say husband can be mefer. 1 second. How? I thought we said husband can only be mefer Nedarim which were done under his watch. So how do you work this out? How do you reconcile this apparent contradiction? A married woman, her husband only has rights to Nedarim which were done during the marriage. But an engaged woman, we say he can be made for even b'koidmen. Nedarim that she brought into the engagement. How can you work this out? Oh, apparently. Because it's done totally different. It's done differently during engagement than after marriage. Oh, apparently. We have proven our point. The reason is, the reason for what? The reason why post-marriage only works on the Nedarim that were done post-marriage. And when it comes to Nedarim during engagement, we say the husband can access even the Nedarim that she came in to the engagement with. The reason is very simple. Because a married couple, a Baal after marriage, does it on his own, without anybody helping him. And therefore the halacha says you can only do stuff that were activated under your watch. That's your schus. But not Nedarim which were done before and which she came into the marriage with. But when it comes to engagement, if it were so that husband was on his own, you're right, would have the same halacha. It would only work on those Nedarim which were activated during the engagement stage under his watch. But since during engagement he's not the only player, he is doing the hafara in conjunction with the father, who doesn't have such limitations, because he's been there all along. He's been there since she was born. A father can be made for Nedarim that preceded the engagement. So on account of the father's contribution to the hafara process, that enables the husband to join forces as well and contribute to the hafara process. Again, because it's in conjunction with the father who has access to even pre-existing Nedarim. And that proves our point, that in fact, the Urus's ability to be made for Nedarim during engagement is only in conjunction with the father. Okay, to summarize, Iktana, who's unmarried, in that case, father interrupts her Nedarim. A married woman, husband, disrupts the Nedarim. In terms of an engaged woman, and she's still, before complete adulthood, she's still in her father's rishus, somewhat. We have a pasuk which teaches us that father and husband join together to do the hafara. One alone is not enough. And in fact, if one does the hakama, that really disrupts things. And we had the Ran's Chiddush that even if one of them did the hakama and was shoyel on the hakama, you can go back to reset the clock and have them both come together again to do the hafara, and that would work as well. All the best to you and Hatzlacha Rabbah.